Welcome back to the Celeb Podcast. Today we're diving into a trial that's really turning heads. Federal prosecutors painted a picture of Sean Diddy Combs as both a celebrated mogul by day and a criminal mastermind by night, with allegations ranging from sex trafficking to drug distribution, intimidation, and even violence.
Right, and it's pretty wild to hear that kind of dual narrative. How do you think the prosecution built such an intense picture of him?
Well, they layered evidence over decades, testimonies, financial records, intercepted communications, even forensic bits. They described him as a manipulative predator who apparently used his fame and vast resources to lure vulnerable women into dangerous situations and then silence.
That's pretty heavy stuff. And then, of course, his defense team fired back hard, right? They argued it was all media sensationalism, blaming false memories and unreliable hearsay. What's your take on that?
Exactly. They insisted that the allegations were opportunistic and that Combs was just a victim of his own fame. They pointed to his reputation for philanthropy, support for artists, and his overall success. But it's really fascinating how the prosecution countered each of those points with detailed eyewitness accounts and physical evidence.
So let's dig into the details. One of the key witnesses was Jane Doe 1, who recounted meeting Combs at age 19, right? She alleged that a mentorship quickly turned into a series of disturbing encounters involving drugs and non-consensual acts.
Absolutely. Jane Doe 1's testimony was central. She described being offered drinks that left her incoherent, kind of like waking up in a strange hotel room without recollection of anything, and that reportedly Combs even involved other people.
That's chilling. And then there was Raymond T., his former house manager. He testified about extravagant gatherings at Combs's LA mansion, where guests were heavily drinking, and some women even passed out. But he admitted to not reporting what he saw because he was afraid, huh?
Yes, exactly. His testimony really underlined a party culture that blurred the line between consensual festivities and illegal conduct. He even mentioned hearing screams and witnessing fights at these gatherings.
And let's not forget security footage from his LA residence. Although it was grainy, the prosecution highlighted moments when visibly impaired women were carried into private rooms and only emerged the next morning. How did that play into the overall case?
The footage was used to visually back up the testimonies, proving that many of these women were in vulnerable states. They weren't in full control of their decisions at that time. The defense, of course, argued that the video didn't definitively show lack of consent, but the judge still allowed it with careful instructions on how to interpret it.
Right, I remember that part. Then there was Danielle Richards. Her account really struck a chord, didn't it? She described Combs as paranoid and controlling, and even talked about him using spyware on staff phones. That's pretty intense.
Oh, totally. Her testimony added another layer by revealing an operational system where she was in the middle of damage control, booking hotel rooms, delivering cash settlements, and basically managing crises. And when she got emotional during cross-examination, it only amplified the gravity of her experience.
It's hard to ignore that emotional element. Right. And then there's Mario Winford, the former bodyguard. His explosive testimony that he was ordered to handle situations by smashing phones and following women really raised eyebrows. How did his testimony complement the other evidence?
It's like each witness was adding a piece to the puzzle. Mario's account connected the dots on internal orders, like delivering a settlement envelope, and even suggesting that Combs kept a stash of drugs for guests. It painted a picture of an environment where control and intimidation were engineered at multiple levels.
Yeah, it's like a systemic problem, not just some isolated incidents. But the defense did have their own narrative, didn't they? They called these allegations circumstantial and even argued that no direct eyewitness had seen Combs commit the crimes. What do you think about their stance?
Well, their argument hinged on the idea that the evidence was a collection of circumstantial indicators rather than direct proof. They claimed that witnesses had their own biases or were swayed by the media. Honestly, though, when you look at the consistency in testimonies, like the similarities between Jane Doe 1 and Jane Doe 2, it forms a pretty
Sure, but isn't it possible that media
narrative.
hype could have influenced some testimonies? Exactly. I'm inclined to challenge that a bit. I mean, while media sensationalism could play a role, the defense's argument that it all boils down to unreliable hearsay seems a bit like trying to dismiss a mountain of evidence by, minimizing everything as circumstantial.
Right, I see that point. But isn't it also true that with such high stakes, even slight inconsistencies need thorough scrutiny? Yeah, that's a fair critique, and it's where expert testimony entered the fray. The prosecution brought in a psychologist to explain trauma bonding, a process where victims may remain in abusive relationships due to intermittent kindness and manipulation. This, they argued, fit well with the delayed disclosures and some inconsistencies in the testimonies.
A lot of psychology involved. And then the defense had their own expert who countered by suggesting that recovered memories can be quite suggestible, particularly under media exposure or therapy. How do you see that clash of expert opinions?
It's like two sides of the same coin. The prosecution's experts stressed that the victims had disclosed their experiences early to trusted friends and professionals, which gives the accounts more credibility, while the defense aimed to sow doubt about memory reliability. Honestly, it's a tricky battleground because memories can be fundamentally fragile.
Definitely a complex issue. Now, there was also that sealed affidavit from Anthony A.J. Wells, the senior security consultant who didn't appear. His affidavit mentioned bribes and intimidation tactics. That had to add extra fuel to the prosecution's narrative, didn't it?
Absolutely. Although his identity was partially redacted, his account underlined that Combs's influence reached high into his own ranks, ordering settlements and NDA signings to keep things hush-hush. That affidavit, even with redactions, strengthened the pattern of coordinated suppression of evidence.
Yeah, it's like every piece played into this bigger picture. Right, and as the trial evolved, it wasn't just about the eyewitness accounts, was it? The introduction of medical records, bruises, and even forensic exhibits, like hospital reports, really bolstered the prosecution's case by hinting at physical evidence of these alleged altercations.
Definitely. Those forensic exhibits were devastating in their own right because they provided tangible physical signs of trauma, photos of bruises, records of fractures, even hospitalization reports. And while the defense argued these injuries could have innocent explanations, the weight of consistency across multiple testimonies really made it hard to ignore.
Evidence like that speaks volumes. I also found it interesting how the trial didn't just stay confined to the courtroom. We even heard about the media's role, with defense lawyers calling it trial by media, while the judge insisted that the jury must focus solely on the courtroom evidence. What are your thoughts on that dynamic?
It's like the trial became a spectacle not just legally, but also in public opinion. Both sides were very aware that the media was watching. The defense suggested that leaked documents and media narratives, often picked up out of context, were influencing perceptions. Yet the judge was quite firm, reminding everyone that the verdict must be based solely on what was formally presented in court.
Yep, definitely a tense balance. And then you have the industry insiders stepping up, the testimonies from music executives like Tasha Gordon and Rico James that described a culture of silence and fear. How significant do you think these accounts were?
Oh, they were critical. Their testimonies brought in the broader picture of an industry where young talents and aspiring artists were enticed into problematic situations. It wasn't just about one individual. These accounts indicated there was a systemic culture where the powerful capitalized on control.
Right, it's like this whole culture, not an isolated case. Then there was a twist with Cassie Ventura's indirect appearance through the 2023 lawsuit documentation. Even though she didn't testify, her case kind of catalyzed further investigations and encouraged other accusers to come forward. It really adds layers to the whole narrative, doesn't it?
Absolutely, it's like a domino effect. Cassie Ventura's allegations, even though managed quietly, lent credibility to other accounts. The prosecution used this to underline a pattern that spans over decades. And when you factor in the additional testimonies, say from anonymous accusers like Jane Doe 2, it really forms this cohesive, albeit disturbing story.
I agree. It's also interesting how digital evidence entered the spotlight, especially with emails and texts extracted from Combs's devices. Those messages, like the chilling "get her quiet, you know what to do," seem to be almost incriminating. How do you weigh that against the defense's insistence on alternative interpretations?
The digital trails really bolstered the prosecution's claim of a coordinated operation aimed at silencing accusers. The defense argued that phrases like quiet could have innocent interpretations, but when you see them in the context of narrative patterns and corroborated witness accounts, they do add a chilling consistency to the overall case.
It does seem quite damning when put all together. Now, amidst all this testimony and evidence, there was a clear division between how the prosecution and defense viewed the events. The prosecution was emphasizing patterns of coercion and systematic crime, while the defense maintained that it was all circumstantial and blown out of proportion by media frenzy. What's your take on this tug of war?
It's definitely a classic legal tug-of-war scenario. The prosecution argued that patterns of behavior, even if not captured in one dramatic eyewitness moment, are sufficient to establish a narrative. The defense countered that without a single unequivocal moment of witnessed criminal conduct, the case is largely built on inferences. I mean, it's like arguing over whether consistent shadows prove there's a monster in the room. It's not as clear.
But isn't the consistency across so many testimonies a strong indicator? Exactly. And that challenge between inference and direct evidence forms one of the core dilemmas of modern trials. The judge even reminded jurors that credibility and the weight of circumstantial evidence are valid considerations, and not every piece of evidence has to be a direct eyewitness account.
True, and that's something that really stood out. Amid all the evidence, from forensic exhibits to digital logs, the underlying question is whether a pattern of behavior can be as compelling as direct observation. And frankly, given the complexity and scale of these allegations, it's a legally and emotionally charged debate.
Absolutely, it's a tightrope walk for the jury. I also found it fascinating that part of the trial coverage included interviews and input from court reporters and industry insiders, nearly like an on-the-ground narrative unfolding in real time. How important do you think that dimensions add to the story?
They add a huge contextual layer. When you have everyday industry voices, like former executives and personal trainers, testifying about a culture of silence and intimidation, it broadens the narrative from a single case to a systemic issue in the industry. It's like moving from a snapshot to a full album of evidence.
That really drives the point home. And with reporters, legal experts, and even casual discussions in the media, it sets a stage where every new detail becomes a public spectacle, which undoubtedly influences how all of this is perceived.
For sure. The interplay between media and courtroom, especially in cases involving celebrities, creates an atmosphere where every statement is under the microscope. And there's constant pressure on both sides to present a flawless narrative. But wait, there's always the next twist, as alleged additional testimonies and potential new witnesses continue to emerge.
Yeah, it's like a live drama unfolding, huh? Exactly. And as we keep covering it from New York, With updates from our correspondents, legal experts, and even some industry insiders, we're committed to bringing every significant shift in this case to the listeners. This trial, with its layers of media, legal strategy, and human drama, promises to reshape public discourse on accountability in celebrity culture.
Indeed, stay tuned because we're on it every day, ready to break down the details and bring you fresh insights as they come. Thanks for joining the conversation. More to come next time on the Celeb Podcast.